The widow who kissed a duke and changed everything. They called her a murderer, a cold-blooded wife who'd driven her husband to his grave. In the glittering heart of London's cruelest ballroom, Elara Whitmore stood accused, not by law, but by something far more vicious, society itself. The room wanted her blood. They wanted her broken, exiled, erased. But when a Highland duke stepped from the shadows and claimed her under his protection, everything shifted. And when she kissed him in front of them all, the scandal that followed would either destroy her or set her free. Stay until the end to see how this widow defied an empire. Like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. The chandeliers burned too bright. Elara Whitmore had noticed that the moment she'd stepped into the Ashford ballroom, how the light seemed sharper tonight, crueler, like it was designed to expose every flaw, every tremor, every bead of sweat forming along the back of her neck. The music swelled around her, violins and cellos weaving through the chatter of London's elite, but it all felt hollow, performative. A beautiful lie covering something rotten underneath. She shouldn't have come, but staying home would have been worse. Staying home would have been surrender. Is that her? The whisper came from somewhere to her left. Elara didn't turn. She'd learned not to. Turning only confirmed that yes, they were talking about her, and that gave them permission to do it louder. I heard she barely waited a month before she started appearing in public again. Shameless. Well, what did you expect? A woman like that has no decency. Alara's gloved fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. The bubbles inside had long gone flat, but she held it anyway because it gave her hands something to do. Something other than shake. It had been 6 weeks since Richard died. 6 weeks since they'd pulled his broken body from the wreckage of his carriage on the Dover Road. 6 weeks since the constable had come to her door, hat in hand, voice low and careful, telling her that her husband had been driving recklessly. Again. And this time there'd been no walking away from it. She hadn't cried. That was the problem. She'd stood there in the foyer of the townhouse she'd shared with him for 3 miserable years, listened to the constable's explanation, nodded politely, and said, "Thank you for informing me." No tears, no collapse, no wailing grief that society expected from a fresh widow. And London had noticed. "Did you see her at the funeral?" Another whisper, this one from a woman in emerald silk standing near the orchestra. Dry-eyed the entire time, cold as winter. "I heard she refused to wear full mourning blacks, said they didn't suit her complexion." That one was a lie, but Elara had stopped trying to correct the lies weeks ago. The truth didn't matter to these people. They'd already decided who she was. The murderer. The heartless wife who'd driven her poor, charming husband to recklessness and ruin. Never mind that Richard had been reckless long before he'd met her. Never mind that he'd spent their marriage drinking himself numb, gambling away her dowry, and coming home at dawn smelling like other women's perfume. Never mind that the last time she'd seen him alive, he'd shoved her hard enough that she'd hit the corner of the dining table and bruised 3 ribs. None of that mattered. What mattered was the story. And the story London wanted was simple. A beautiful young widow with no tears and no remorse. A woman who'd maybe, just maybe, wanted her husband dead. "Elara!" She turned at the sound of her name and found Caroline Pemberton approaching, her face arranged in an expression of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. Caroline had been a friend once, or at least Elara had thought so. Before. "Caroline?" Alara's voice came out steady. That was something, at least. "I'm so glad you came tonight." Caroline's smile was thin, brittle. "Though I must admit I was surprised to see your name on the guest list. After everything that's happened, after my husband died, you mean?" "Well, yes." Caroline glanced around, lowering her voice. "Darling, people are talking. Surely you must know that." "I'm aware." "Then why—" Caroline stopped herself, smoothing her skirts with gloved hands. "Forgive me. I only mean that perhaps it would be wiser to withdraw for a while. Give the gossip time to settle. Translation: disappear. Hide. Admit guilt by absence." "I've done nothing wrong," Elara said quietly. "Of course not." Caroline's tone suggested she believed the opposite. "But perception matters, doesn't it? And right now the perception is that I killed him." The words hung between them like smoke. Caroline's face flushed. No one is saying that. Not exactly. They're saying it quietly. That's worse. Caroline opened her mouth, closed it again. Then, I'm only trying to help. Are you? Alara met her gaze. Because it feels like you're asking me to admit to something I didn't do. Before Caroline could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd near the entrance. Heads turned, conversations paused. Alara followed the wave of attention and saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and weather. He moved through the ballroom like a wolf through a henhouse. Not threatening, exactly, but utterly unbothered by the startled looks and whispered speculation that followed in his wake. "Who is that?" someone murmured. "A Scot, by the look of him." "The Duke of Blackridge, I think. Just inherited the title, first time in London in years." Darian Wolfe. Alara had heard the name whispered in corners over the past week. A Highland Duke who'd spent most of his life avoiding the London season, preferring the brutal isolation of his northern estates to the glittering madness of the capital. Rumor said he'd only come south to settle his late uncle's affairs before returning to Scotland for good. He looked like he belonged somewhere wild, somewhere cold and unforgiving. He looked, Alara thought distantly, like he didn't give a damn what anyone in this room thought of him. "Alara," Caroline's voice had gone sharp. "People are staring." They always were. But this time, they weren't staring at her. They were staring at him, and at the fact that he'd stopped walking and was now looking directly at her. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Something flickered in his gaze. Not pity, not curiosity. Something else. Something that made her spine straighten and her chin lift without conscious thought. Then someone laughed, loud and deliberate, and the moment shattered. "Well, well." The voice belonged to Lord Ashford himself, their host, a man with too much wine in his blood and too much cruelty in his smile. "If it isn't the Merry Widow herself, tell me, Mrs. Whitmore, how does it feel to be free?" The ballroom went silent. Alara's throat closed, every eye in the room fixed on her. Ashford swayed slightly as he approached, his face flushed. "No, truly. I'm curious. Your husband dead barely 2 months, and here you are, dancing and drinking as if—" "I haven't danced once tonight," Alara said evenly. "Semantics." Ashford waved a dismissive hand. "The point stands. Most widows have the decency to grieve. But you—" He leaned in, and she smelled brandy on his breath. "You look relieved." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Agreement, scandal, hunger for more. "That's enough, Ashford," Caroline's voice surprisingly firm. But Ashford wasn't finished. "Did you do it, Mrs. Whitmore? Did you whisper poison in his ear until he drove himself into the ground? Did you tell him he wasn't man enough, wasn't good enough, until he had no choice but to—" Alara's hand moved before she could think. The slap cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. Ashford staggered back, hand flying to his reddening cheek. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, shocked laughter. Alara's palms stung. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You bitch!" Ashford lunged. Alara stumbled backward, her heel catching on her hem. She was going to fall. He was going to grab her. The crowd was going to let him because she'd already been judged, already been sentenced, and this was just the execution. A hand caught her elbow, steadied her. "I wouldn't." The voice was low, rough-edged, with the faintest trace of Highland burr. Ashford froze. Darian Wolfe stood between them now, one hand still on Alara's arm, his body angled like a barrier. He wasn't tall enough to loom, but he didn't need to be. There was something in the way he held himself, calm, immovable, utterly unbothered, that made Ashford take an involuntary step back. "This is none of your concern, Blackridge," Ashford said, but his voice had lost its edge. "You were about to lay hands on a woman." Darian's tone didn't rise. Didn't need to. "That makes it my concern. She struck me. After you accused her of murder in front of half of London, I'd say she showed remarkable restraint." Darian glanced at Alara, and something in his expression gentled. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. Didn't trust her voice yet. "Good." He looked back at Ashford. "Apologize." "I will not—" "You will." Darian's voice dropped lower. or I'll make certain that every man in Scotland knows you for a coward who attacks widows at parties. Your choice." The room held its breath. Ashford's face went from red to purple, but he looked around, at the watching crowd, at the Duke of Blackridge's unyielding stare, at his own rapidly crumbling dignity, and something in him crumpled. "My apologies, Mrs. Whitmore," he muttered. Then he turned and shoved his way through the crowd toward the doors. The ballroom remained frozen for another beat. Then the whispers started again, faster and sharper than before. Alara realized Darian was still holding her arm. "You should leave," he said quietly, leaning in just enough that only she could hear. "They're going to tear you apart now. You know that." "I know." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "But I won't run." "That's pride talking." "Maybe." She met his eyes. "But it's all I have left." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "There's a study," he said. "2 doors down the east corridor. Go there. Lock the door. I'll make sure no one follows." "Why are you helping me?" "Because no one else is." He released her arm and stepped back. "Go. Now." Alara didn't wait. She turned, lifted her skirts, and walked, not ran, walked, toward the corridor he'd indicated. She could feel every eye on her back, could hear the whispers rising like a tide. Disgraceful. Shameless. Murderer. She didn't look back. The corridor was blessedly empty, lit by sconces that cast long shadows across the wallpaper. Alara counted doors. 1, 2, and pushed through the second into a small study lined with books and smelling faintly of pipe tobacco. She closed the door, locked it, pressed her back against the wood, and finally, let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking now, all of her was shaking. She'd slapped Lord Ashford in front of half of London's aristocracy. She'd made a scene, confirmed every terrible thing they already believed about her, and she didn't regret it, not even a little. Alara pushed away from the door and crossed to the window. Outside, the London night was dark and close, the street below empty except for a few waiting carriages. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. "I won't run," she whispered to her reflection. "I won't." But God, she was tired. Tired of the whispers, tired of the stares, tired of carrying the weight of Richard's death like it was somehow her fault, her burden, her crime. She hadn't loved him. She'd stopped loving him, if she ever had, within the first year of their marriage. But she hadn't killed him. His recklessness had done that all on its own. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Darian's voice. Alara hesitated, then crossed to the door and unlocked it. He slipped inside quickly, closing it behind him. "They're looking for you," he said. "Ashford's rallying support. Says you're unstable, dangerous." "Of course he is." "They're talking about having you removed from the house, possibly from London entirely." Alara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "On what grounds?" "Does it matter?" Darian leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "They don't need grounds. They need a story. And you just gave them a spectacular one. So what do you suggest? That I apologize? Grovel?" "I suggest you fight back." She stared at him. "How?" "By refusing to let them control the narrative." He pushed off the desk and took a step closer. "They want you to be the villain, the cold, heartless widow. So be something else. Be defiant, be unbothered, be impossible to ignore." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." His eyes held hers. "You didn't run just now. You walked, head high. That was defiance. Do it again. Go back into that ballroom and show them you're not afraid." "I am afraid." "Then pretend you're not." His voice softened. "I've spent my life pretending to be civilized when every instinct tells me to walk away from this madness and go home to the Highlands. Pretending works. Trust me." "Why are you doing this?" The question came out raw. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "Because I know what it's like to be judged for things you can't control." He paused. "And because watching them tear you apart makes me want to burn this whole bloody ballroom to the ground. But that seems excessive, so I'm offering you another option." Despite everything, Alara felt a smile tug at her lips. "What option?" "Protection." "From you?" "From them." He gestured toward the door, toward the ballroom beyond. If I claim you're under my protection, publicly, they'll hesitate. Not forever, but long enough for you to make your next move. What next move? That's up to you. His gaze didn't waver. But you'll have time to decide, and you won't be alone. Alara's heart was pounding again, but for a different reason now. You barely know me. I know enough. They'll say terrible things about you too. About us. Let them. He smiled, and it was sharp-edged, dangerous. I'm leaving for Scotland in a month anyway. Their opinions mean nothing to me. Then why stay at all? Because I want to. He stepped closer. Because I think you deserve better than what they're giving you, and because... He stopped, something flickering across his face. Because I haven't met anyone worth talking to in this cursed city until tonight. Alara's breath caught. So, Darian extended his hand. What do you say, Mrs. Whitmore? Shall we give them something real to gossip about? She looked at his hand, at his face, at the steady certainty in his eyes. Then she took his hand. Call me Alara. Darian. His grip was warm, calloused, solid. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Alara didn't feel like she was drowning. They walked back into the ballroom together. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, eyes widened. Darian didn't let go of her hand. Alara kept her chin high. Lord Ashford stood near the far end of the room, surrounded by a knot of supporters. When he saw them, his face went dark with fury. Blackridge, his voice carried across the sudden silence. What do you think you're doing? Escorting Mrs. Whitmore back to the festivities, Darian said calmly. Is that a problem? She assaulted me. You accused her of murder. I'd say she was generous in only slapping you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ashford's hands clenched into fists. You can't possibly be defending her. Everyone knows gossip, Darian cut in. Not facts. And until someone presents actual evidence that Mrs. Whitmore is guilty of anything other than poor taste in husbands, I suggest you keep your accusations to yourself. The room erupted. Alara felt the weight of 100 stares, heard the explosion of whispers. But Darian's hand remained steady in hers. Mrs. Whitmore is under my protection, Darian announced, his voice cutting through the noise. Anyone who wishes to slander her will answer to me. Silence. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, You're claiming her? I'm claiming basic human decency, Darian said. Perhaps you should try it. Ashford stepped forward. You're making a mistake, Blackridge. She's poison. She'll destroy you. The only thing being destroyed here is your reputation. Darian's voice went cold. Keep talking, and I'll make certain of it. Ashford's mouth snapped shut. Darian turned to Alara. Shall we? She didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. They walked through the parted crowd like Moses through the Red Sea. No one dared speak. No one moved. But Alara could feel it, the shift, the hesitation. For the first time since Richard died, the narrative had cracked, and she'd barely begun to fight. The carriage ride back to her townhouse was silent, except for the clatter of wheels on cobblestone and the distant sounds of London settling into uneasy sleep. Alara sat across from Darian, her hands folded in her lap, still feeling the phantom pressure of his grip on hers. He'd insisted on escorting her home. Not asked, insisted, and she'd been too exhausted to argue. You didn't have to do that, she said finally, breaking the silence. Darian looked up from the window. In the dim light of the carriage lamp, his features seemed harder, more angular. Do what? Defend me. Claim me under your protection. Risk your own reputation for someone you don't know. I know you slapped Ashford. A faint smile touched his mouth. That tells me enough. It tells you I'm reckless. It tells me you have a spine. He leaned forward slightly. Most people in that room would have crumbled under the weight of what they were saying about you. You didn't. You fought back. And made everything worse. No. His voice was firm. You made it different. Worse would have been apologizing, begging, giving them what they wanted. Alara looked down at her gloved hands. They were still trembling, though whether from anger or fear or the sheer adrenaline of what had just happened, she couldn't tell. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we make them doubt themselves." "How?" "By refusing to hide." Darian sat back. "Tomorrow, you're going to do something that will shock every gossip in London." "What?" "You're going to attend the Kensington Garden Party." Alara's head snapped up. "That's suicide. Half the people who were at Ashford's ball tonight will be there. They'll expect you to hide, to disappear, to prove their narrative correct by running away." His eyes held hers. "So you won't. You'll show up, head high, unbothered, and I'll be standing right beside you." "Darian." "They want you broken, Alara. Don't give them the satisfaction." The carriage jolted to a stop outside her townhouse. The building looked smaller than she remembered, darker. The windows were unlit. Her housekeeper had likely gone to bed hours ago. Darian opened the carriage door and stepped out, then offered his hand to help her down. His touch was warm, even through their gloves. "Think about it," he said as she reached the steps. "I'll call on you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. "That's early?" "That's intentional. If we're going to do this, we do it properly." He paused. "And Alara?" "Yes?" "Get some sleep. You look like you've been fighting a war." "I have been." "I know." His expression softened just slightly. "But you're not fighting alone anymore." He climbed back into the carriage before she could respond, and a moment later the wheels were clattering away into the night. Alara stood on the steps of her empty house and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope. It was fragile. It was dangerous. Probably foolish. But it was there. She went inside and locked the door behind her. Morning came too quickly. Alara woke to pale sunlight streaming through the gaps in her curtains and the sound of Mrs. Davies, her housekeeper, moving around downstairs. For a moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling, remembering the night before. The ballroom, the accusations, Darian's hand in hers. "You're not fighting alone anymore." She sat up, pushing the blankets aside. Her dress from last night was draped over the chair by the window, still smelling faintly of champagne and expensive perfume. She'd burned the gloves, couldn't stand to look at them after everything. A knock at the door. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Mrs. Davies' voice, tentative. "The Duke of Blackridge is here to see you." Alara glanced at the clock on her mantel. 8:45. Early, just like he'd said. "Tell him I'll be down in 15 minutes. "Yes, ma'am." Alara dressed quickly. A simple day dress in deep blue, her hair pinned back in a style that was respectable without being severe. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, pale, tired, but not broken. Not yet. She found Darian in the sitting room, standing by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. He'd changed from last night's formal attire into something more practical, dark trousers, a gray waistcoat, a coat that looked like it had been made for riding rather than socializing. He looked out of place in her delicate, overly decorated sitting room. Too solid, too real. "You came," she said. He turned. "I said I would." "Most men say a lot of things they don't mean." "I'm not most men." He gestured toward the small table where Mrs. Davies had left tea. "Sit. We need to talk strategy." "Strategy," Alara repeated, but she sat anyway, pouring tea with hands that were steadier than yesterday. "You make it sound like a military campaign." "It is." Darian took the cup she offered. "You're fighting for your reputation, your future. That's war." "And you're my general?" "I'm your ally." He sipped the tea, grimaced slightly. "You need to understand something, Alara. What happened last night changed the game. Ashford won't let it go. He'll gather his allies, spread more poison, try to discredit both of us. So why give him more ammunition by going to the garden party? Because hiding confirms guilt. Showing up, calm, composed, unbothered, plants doubt." He set the cup down. "And doubt is the first crack in their certainty." Alara considered this. What if they refuse to speak to me? What if they turn their backs? Let them. We're not there to win friends. We're there to be seen, to prove you're not afraid. "I am afraid." "Then be afraid and do it anyway." His gaze was steady. "Fear isn't weakness. Acting despite it is strength." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that showing up would be enough. But she'd seen the faces in that ballroom last night, the hunger, the cruelty. "There's something else," Darian said, his tone shifting. "I heard something this morning. From my man of business." "What?" "Rumors about your late husband, about the night he died." Alara's stomach tightened. "What kind of rumors?" "That he wasn't alone in the carriage." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "There was a woman, or so the gossip claims." Darian leaned forward. "I don't know if it's true. But if it is, if there's evidence he was with someone else when he crashed, it changes the story." "It changes nothing," Alara said bitterly. "They'll just say I drove him to it, that my coldness pushed him into another woman's arms." "Maybe. Or maybe it proves he was reckless all on his own." Darian's voice was careful. "Did you know? About the affairs?" "Yes." The word came out flat. "He wasn't subtle. Did he hurt you?" Alara met his eyes. "Why does that matter?" "Because if he did, the people who are crucifying you need to know the kind of man he really was. They won't care. Men like Richard, charming, well-connected, they're forgiven anything. Women like me?" She laughed, sharp and humorless. "We're guilty just for surviving them." Darian's jaw tightened. "Not if we control the story." "How?" "By making them question everything they think they know." He stood, pacing to the window. "The garden party is the first step, but we need more. We need someone credible to vouch for you, someone whose word carries weight." "I don't have anyone like that." "Then we find them." He turned back to her. "What about Richard's family, his brother, his mother? Would any of them speak truthfully about what he was like?" "His mother hates me, blamed me for not giving him an heir." Alara's voice was steady, but the old wound throbbed. "His brother? Maybe. Gerald never liked Richard much. They fought constantly." "Then we talked to Gerald. He lives in Sussex. And even if he'd help, what could he say that wouldn't sound like gossip?" "The truth." Darian's eyes were fierce. "If Richard was cruel, if he was reckless, if he drove himself to ruin without any help from you, that truth needs to be told." Alara wanted to believe it would matter, but she'd learned better. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Don't think too long. We don't have much time." He glanced at the clock. "The garden party starts at noon. We should leave by 11. That's 2 hours from now. Which gives you 2 hours to decide if you're brave enough to face them again." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Alara?" "Yes?" "Last night when I said you weren't alone, I meant it. Whatever happens today, whatever they say or do, I'll be right there. You have my word." He left before she could respond. Alara sat in the sudden silence, the tea growing cold in front of her, and tried to steady the war raging inside her chest. She could stay home, lock the door, let the gossip burn itself out. Or she could fight. 2 hours later, she was sitting in Darian's carriage, wearing a dress the color of spring leaves, and a hat that shadowed her eyes just enough to hide the fear still lingering there. "You look ready," Darian said. "I look terrified." "Same thing." He smiled faintly. "Remember, head high, voice steady. Don't give them anything to use against you." The garden party was being held at the Kensington estate, a sprawling property with manicured lawns and elaborate flower beds that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. Carriages lined the drive, lords and ladies in their finest summer attire strolling through the gardens with glasses of wine and plates of delicate food. Alara's arrival sent a ripple through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone dropped a glass. Darian offered his arm. "Shall we?" She took it, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her, and stepped into the garden. The first person to approach was Lady Whitmore, Richard's mother. She was a tall woman with silver hair and a face that could have been carved from ice. She stopped directly in their path, her expression venomous. "How dare you!" she hissed. Alara's grip on Darian's arm tightened, but her voice stayed level. "Lady Whitmore, you have no right to be here. No right to show your face in decent society after what you did to my son." "I did nothing to your son except marry him. You killed him." The words rang out across the garden. People turned, drawn by the promise of confrontation. Darian stepped forward slightly, his voice cold. "That's a serious accusation, Lady Whitmore. I assume you have evidence?" "Everyone knows gossip isn't evidence." Lady Whitmore's face flushed. "My son was a good man, a kind man. She pointed a shaking finger at Alara. She poisoned him, drove him to recklessness with her coldness, her refusal to be a proper wife. Your son," Alara said quietly, "was a drunk and a gambler who spent our entire marriage in the beds of other women. He was violent and cruel, and the only thing I'm guilty of is surviving him." The garden went silent. Lady Whitmore's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You dare—" "I dare tell the truth." Alara's voice was shaking now, but she didn't stop. "You want to know why I didn't cry at his funeral? Because I'd already cried every tear I had during the 3 years I was married to him. Because the last time I saw him alive, he shoved me so hard I bruised ribs. Because—" Her voice cracked. Darian's hand covered hers on his arm. Steady, grounding. "Because," Alara finished, "I was relieved he was gone, and I won't apologize for that." Lady Whitmore looked like she'd been slapped. "You're a monster." "No, I'm honest." Alara met her gaze, "and I think that terrifies you more than anything." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lady Whitmore turned and swept away, her skirts snapping behind her like flags in a storm. The crowd remained frozen. Alara felt her knees start to buckle. "Walk," Darian murmured. "Don't stop. Not yet." They moved through the garden slowly, deliberately. People parted for them, some in shock, some in disgust, a few with something that looked almost like respect. They reached a fountain at the edge of the lawn, partially hidden by hedges. Alara sank onto the stone bench beside it, her hands shaking violently now. "I can't believe I just said that." "You had to." Darian sat beside her. "She was never going to let you be. You had to push back." "But I just told half of London's aristocracy that my husband beat me." "You told them the truth. They won't believe it." "Some will." His voice was certain. "And the ones who don't, their opinions don't matter." Alara laughed, the sound brittle. "Easy for you to say. You're leaving. I have to live with this." "Then don't." She looked at him. "What?" "Don't live with it. Leave London. Come north." "To Scotland?" "Why not?" He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "You have no family here, no real allies, nothing holding you except a house you hate and a title you never wanted. Come to the Highlands, start over." "I can't just run away." "It's not running if you're choosing something better." Alara stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." He turned to face her fully. "I'm leaving in 3 weeks. The estate is rough, remote. Nothing like London. But it's honest, real. No one there cares about gossip or titles or who you used to be. They'd care that I'm a widow accused of murder. They'd care that you can work, that you don't break easily." His eyes held hers. "The Highlands respect strength, Alara, and you're stronger than anyone in this damned city." Before she could respond, footsteps crunched on the gravel path. A man approached, mid-30s, with Richard's same dark hair but softer features. Gerald Whitmore. "Alara." His voice was cautious. I heard what you said to my mother." She stood, bracing herself. "Gerald, is it true?" He looked pained. "What you said about Richard, did he really—" "Yes." Gerald flinched. "I knew he drank. I knew he gambled. But I didn't know he—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I should have seen it. It wasn't your responsibility to save me." "Maybe not, but I could have been kinder, could have asked if you were all right." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry." The apology hit her harder than any insult. "Thank you." "Oh, my mother won't listen. She's convinced herself of a story where Richard was perfect and you're the villain." "But—" He hesitated. "There are others. People who knew what he was really like. If you need someone to speak for you—" "I do," Darian interjected. "We both do." Gerald looked at him, then back at Alara. Then I'll help. Whatever you need. He left quietly, disappearing back into the garden. Alara sat down again, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her. Did that just happen? She asked. It did. Someone actually believes me. I told you. Doubt is the first crack. Darian stood, offering his hand again. Now we widen it. They stayed at the party another hour, long enough to be seen, long enough to plant the seed of uncertainty. Alara caught whispers as they passed. Some were still cruel, still convinced of her guilt. But others... Did you hear what she said? If it's true, Richard Whitmore was always too charming. I never trusted him. Doubt. Small. Fragile. But there. When they finally left, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Darian walked her to her door again. You did well today, he said. I feel like I just set my entire life on fire. Maybe you did, but fire clears the ground for new growth. He paused at the threshold. Think about what I said, about Scotland. I will. Good. He started to turn, then stopped. Alara? Yes? What you said today about being honest, that took more courage than most people have in their entire lives. Or more stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He smiled. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be harder. He was right. The next 3 days were a blur of whispered conversations and closed doors. Alara's confession spread through London like wildfire. Some believed it, some didn't, but everyone talked about it. Letters arrived daily, some supportive, most not. But then Gerald came through. He brought witnesses, servants from Richard's household who'd seen the bruises, heard the fights, cleaned up the broken glass after his rages. A physician who'd treated Alara twice for falls that both of them knew weren't accidents. The narrative began to crack wider. It wasn't enough to clear her completely. Scandal stuck like tar, and there would always be those who believed the worst. But it was enough to plant reasonable doubt, enough to give her breathing room. Darian called on her every day. Sometimes they talked strategy. Sometimes they just talked. About Scotland, about his plans for the estate, about what freedom might look like far from London's suffocating judgment. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Alara began to imagine it, a life in the north, clean air, open sky, a place where her past didn't define her, a place where she could start over. On the 7th day after the garden party, Darian arrived at her door with different news. There's a ball tonight, he said without preamble. The Ashmore Ball, final event of the season. I'm not going. Yes, you are. His voice was firm. This is the moment, Alara. Everyone who matters will be there. If you don't show up, they'll say you're hiding, that you couldn't face them. I've faced them enough. Then face them one more time. And this time, we make it count. She looked at him, at the determination in his eyes, the absolute certainty that she could do this. What do you have in mind? Something bold. He stepped closer. Something that will shift the power permanently. Darian, trust me. And despite every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, to stay safe, she did. The Ashmore ballroom was even more opulent than Ashford's had been. Crystal chandeliers, gold leaf on the walls, an orchestra that probably cost more than her townhouse. Alara wore black. Not mourning black. She'd left that behind weeks ago. This was different, elegant, defiant. A dress that said she knew exactly what they thought of her and didn't care. When she entered on Darian's arm, the room didn't just go quiet. It went still, like the moment before a storm breaks. Darian led her onto the dance floor without asking permission. The orchestra started, a waltz, slow and sweeping, and they danced. Alara had forgotten what it felt like to dance with someone who actually knew how. Richard had always been too drunk, too clumsy, but Darian moved like he'd been born to it, leading her through the steps with easy confidence. They're staring, she murmured. Let them. Darian, what are we? Just follow my lead. The music swelled. Darian pulled her closer, his hand warm at her waist. And then he leaned in and whispered, Do you trust me? Yes. Then kiss me. Her eyes widened. What? Kiss me. Right here. Right now. In front of all of them. That's insane. That's the point. His eyes were blazing. You want to take control of your story? Then do something they'll never forget. Something that makes you the one in control, not them. They'll crucify us both. They're already trying, so let's give them something real to talk about. His voice dropped lower. Show them you're not afraid. Show them you choose this. Choose me. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This was madness. This was social suicide. This was freedom. She kissed him. Right there in the center of the ballroom, with half of London watching, she pulled the Duke of Blackridge down to her level and kissed him like the world was ending. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, someone screamed, but Alara didn't care. For the first time in her entire life, she didn't care what they thought. When she finally pulled back, Darian was smiling, fierce and wild and completely unbothered. Well, he said, that's one way to make a statement. Before she could respond, he turned to face the crowd. I'm courting Mrs. Whitmore, he announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. Publicly, officially, and if anyone here has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. Silence. Then Lord Ashford pushed through the crowd, his face purple with rage. You're a fool, Blackridge. She'll destroy you just like she destroyed... Finish that sentence, Darian said quietly, and I'll call you out. Ashford froze. A duel. He was threatening a duel. You wouldn't dare. Try me. For a long, terrible moment, no one breathed. Then Ashford turned and stormed out, slamming the doors behind him. The spell broke. Conversations erupted. Some people left in disgust. Others stayed, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Darian turned back to Alara. We should probably leave before someone actually challenges me to a duel. Probably. She was shaking again, but this time it felt different, lighter. Did we just commit social suicide? Spectacularly. And you're still planning to court me? I don't say things I don't mean. He offered his arm. Shall we? They walked out together past the shocked faces and scandalized whispers into the cool London night. Outside, Alara started laughing, wild, uncontrolled, almost hysterical. I kissed you in front of everyone. You did. I just destroyed whatever was left of my reputation. Or liberated yourself from it. He helped her into the carriage. How do you feel? She thought about it, really thought about it. Terrified, she said finally. And alive. More alive than I've felt in years. Good. Darian climbed in across from her. Because tomorrow, the real fight begins. What do you mean? I mean that kiss just declared war. On the gossips, on the scandalmongers, on everyone who tried to break you. His eyes met hers in the dim light. And I don't lose wars, Alara. Neither will you. The carriage rolled through the London streets, carrying them away from the wreckage of her old life and toward something she couldn't quite name yet. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Alara wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. The morning after the kiss, London erupted. By the time Alara woke, 3 newspapers had already printed versions of the scandal, each more lurid than the last. Mrs. Davies brought them up with breakfast, her face pale and tight with worry. They're calling you terrible things, ma'am, she said quietly, setting the tray down. Worse than before. Alara picked up the first paper. The headline screamed at her in thick black letters. Widow's shameless display. Duke of Blackridge ensnared by Scarlet Woman. She set it down without reading further and reached for the tea instead. Are you all right? Mrs. Davies asked. I don't know yet. Alara's hands were steady on the cup. That was something. Is the Duke here? Downstairs. Been waiting since 8. Of course he had. Alara dressed quickly, choosing a simple gray dress that felt like armor, and found Darian in the sitting room examining the same newspapers she'd just abandoned. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. You've seen them, he said. Not a question. Hard to miss. She sat across from him. Are you regretting last night yet? No. The answer came without hesitation. You? Ask me in a week. A faint smile touched his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. There's something you need to know. I received a letter this morning from my steward in Scotland. The shift in his tone made her stomach drop. What's wrong? There's been trouble. Clan MacLeish, they've been pushing at our borders for months, testing our strength. Now they're threatening open conflict if I don't return immediately to settle the matter. How immediate? I leave in 3 days. 3 days? The words landed like stones. I see. Alara set her teacup down carefully. Then you should go. Come with me. She'd known he would ask, had been half expecting it since their conversation in the garden, but hearing it now with everything so raw and uncertain made it real in a way that terrified her. Darian, I know it's fast, I know it's insane. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But staying here, fighting this endless battle against people who will never forgive you for surviving, what's the point? Come north, marry me, start over where none of this matters. Marry you? Her voice came out strangled. Yes. We've known each other less than 2 weeks. I've known you long enough to see you're stronger than anyone in this city, long enough to want you beside me when I face what's coming. His eyes burned into hers. I'm not asking you to love me, Alara. I'm asking you to choose yourself, choose freedom, choose a life that's yours instead of one they've trapped you in. She wanted to say yes. The word was right there, pressing against her teeth, but fear held it back. What if I'm not strong enough? The question came out small, broken. What if I get there and I can't handle it? The cold, the isolation, then we'll figure it out together. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. You survived, Richard. You survived the worst London could throw at you. You kissed me in front of a ballroom full of vultures and didn't break. You're stronger than you think. Or I'm just good at pretending. Same thing. His grip tightened. Come with me, please. Alara looked down at their joined hands. His was scarred across the knuckles, calloused from work she couldn't imagine. Hers was soft, pale, the hands of someone who'd never done anything harder than hold a teacup. They didn't match, but somehow they fit. I need time, she said finally. To think, 3 days. That's all the time I have. Then I'll give you an answer before you leave. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded and released her hand. Fair enough. But when he left, the house felt colder than before. The next 2 days were chaos. More letters arrived, some from Gerald and the few allies she'd gained offering support, most from strangers who felt entitled to share their disgust. One particularly vicious note suggested she do London a favor and follow Richard into the grave. Alara burned it without finishing, but the worst came on the second day when a constable appeared at her door with a summons. Lady Whitmore was suing her for defamation, for slander, for publicly destroying her son's reputation and causing emotional distress to his grieving mother. This is madness, Alara said, staring at the document. She's suing me for telling the truth? Gerald, who'd come as soon as he'd heard, looked grim. My mother is desperate. The truth about Richard is spreading, and it's destroying the legacy she's spent years building. This is her way of fighting back. Can she win? In court? Maybe not. But she doesn't need to win. She just needs to drag you through the mud long enough that no one remembers the truth. Only the scandal. He ran a hand through his hair. This could take months, Alara. Maybe years. And every day of it will be torture. So what do I do? You could settle, apologize publicly, retract your statements. No. The word came out hard. I'm not apologizing for surviving him. Then you fight, and it will cost you everything. Alara looked at the summons again, at Lady Whitmore's signature sharp and angry at the bottom. Everything. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her bedroom, watching the London fog roll past her window, thick and gray and suffocating. Somewhere in that fog was Darian, preparing to leave, and somewhere else was Lady Whitmore, sharpening her knives. Alara had a choice: stay and fight a battle that would drain her dry, leave her broken and penniless even if she won, or run. Disappear into the highlands with a man she barely knew, and pray that whatever waited there was better than what she was leaving behind. Neither option felt safe, but only one felt like freedom. At dawn, she made her decision. She found Darian at his London residence, a townhouse he'd been using while settling his uncle's estate. He answered the door himself, still in shirt sleeves, his hair damp like he'd just washed. "Elara." Surprise flickered across his face. "What?" "I'll come." He went very still. "What?" "To Scotland. I'll marry you. I'll come." The words tumbled out fast, like if she didn't say them all at once, she'd lose her nerve. "But I need you to understand something first." "All right." "I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Of you, of Scotland, of what happens if this doesn't work. I don't love you. I don't even know you well enough to love you. And I'm bringing nothing but scandal and legal trouble and—" He kissed her. Not like at the ball. Not for show. Not for shock value. This was different. Gentler. Real. When he pulled back, his hands were cupped around her face. "I don't need you to be brave," he said quietly. "I just need you to be here. I don't know how to be a duchess. Neither do I, and I've been a duke for 6 months. A smile tugged at his mouth. "We'll figure it out." "The lawsuit? Let Gerald handle it. Or don't. It doesn't matter once we're north." His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. "Nothing here matters anymore, Elara. Only what comes next." She wanted to believe him. So she did. They were married 3 hours later in a small chapel with Gerald and Mrs. Davies as witnesses. No fanfare, no flowers, no guests. Just a few words spoken in front of a sleepy priest who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When it was done, Elara stared down at the thin gold band on her finger and felt nothing. No joy, no regret, just a strange, hollow numbness. "Are you all right?" Darian asked as they left the chapel. "I just married a stranger to escape a lawsuit." "Fair point." He helped her into the waiting carriage. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Ask me again when we're freezing to death in some highland wasteland." "It's not a wasteland, it's beautiful." "You're biased." "Probably." He settled across from her as the carriage lurched into motion. "We leave tonight. 8 o'clock train north." "That fast?" "The McLeish situation is getting worse. My steward's last letter said they're mobilizing. If I don't get back soon, we could be looking at real bloodshed." Elara's stomach twisted. "You didn't mention bloodshed before." "Would it have changed your answer?" She thought about it. "No." "Then it doesn't matter." But his jaw was tight, his hands clenched on his knees. He was worried, more worried than he was letting on. "Tell me about them," Elara said. "The McLeish. Old clan, proud. They've had their eye on our lands for generations, but my uncle kept them in check through a combination of diplomacy and sheer stubbornness." Darian's expression darkened. "I inherited the title, but not the respect. They see me as weak, unproven, an outsider who spent too much time in England to understand Highland ways." "Are they right?" "About me being an outsider? Maybe. About being weak?" His eyes met hers. "They're about to find out they're wrong." The train north was a beast of iron and steam, rattling through the countryside like something alive. Elara watched London disappear behind them, the city shrinking into fog and memory, and felt something loosen in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or terror. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Darian sat across from her in their private compartment, reading reports from his steward, his face growing grimmer with each page. "How bad?" Elara asked. "Bad enough." He set the papers aside. "They've burned 3 of our outlying farms, killed livestock, sent word that if I don't cede the disputed borderlands, they'll march on the main estate." "Can they do that? Just march on you?" "In the Highlands? Yes. The Crown's authority is more suggestion than law up there. Clans settle their own disputes." He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "And usually that means blood." "So what will you do?" "Meet with their chief. Try diplomacy first. And if that doesn't work, then we fight." He said it simply, like it was inevitable. Maybe it was. The journey took 2 days. They stopped once in Edinburgh, long enough for Elara to see the castle looming over the city like a stone guardian, and then continued north into country that grew wilder with every mile. Trees gave way to moorland, roads became tracks. The few towns they passed looked ancient, clinging to the landscape like they'd grown there instead of being built, and it was beautiful. harsh and unforgiving and utterly beautiful. "This is it," Darien said as they finally approached his lands. Blackridge. Alara pressed her face to the window and saw it rising from the moors, a stone fortress that looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. Dark walls, narrow windows, towers that pierced the gray sky like spears. It looked like a place built for war. "It's brutal," Darien finished. "I know, but it's strong. It's lasted 400 years and it'll last 400 more." The carriage, they'd switched from train to carriage hours ago, rattled through gates that looked thick enough to stop a battering ram. Inside the walls, the courtyard was packed dirt and stone, surrounded by buildings that housed stables, storage, barracks. People emerged as they stopped, men in rough wool and leather, women with wind-burned faces and suspicious eyes, all of them staring at Alara like she was something alien, which, she supposed, she was. "Your Grace." A man stepped forward, older, gray-bearded, with eyes like flint. "You're back." McTavish, Darien climbed down and helped Alara after him. "This is my wife, Alara, Duchess of Blackridge." The silence was deafening. McTavish's eyes swept over her, her London dress, her soft hands, her complete and utter unsuitability for this place, and his mouth thinned. "Wife," he repeated. "You didn't mention a wife in your letters." "It happened quickly." Clearly, McTavish's tone suggested this was not a compliment. "Welcome to Blackridge, Your Grace. Though I'll be honest, you picked a hell of a time to arrive." "The McLeish?" Darien asked. "Worse. They sent word this morning. They're demanding a meeting. 3 days from now, on neutral ground." McTavish's face was grim. "They're bringing 50 men, armed. Then so will we." "Your Grace," McTavish lowered his voice. "They're looking for an excuse to fight. Any sign of weakness, and they'll take it as permission to attack." "I'm not weak. You're untested, and now you show up with an English wife." He stopped, seeming to remember Alara was standing right there. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but this complicates things." "How?" Alara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "The clans respect strength, tradition. A Highland wife would have shown you understood our ways. An English duchess shows you don't." McTavish looked at Darien. "They'll see it as an insult, proof you've turned your back on your heritage." "Then they'll be wrong. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what they believe." McTavish's jaw worked. "I'm just saying, watch yourself at that meeting. They'll be looking for any excuse." He turned and walked away, barking orders at the assembled staff. Alara looked at Darien. "Did I just make things worse?" "No," but he didn't sound certain. "Come on, let me show you inside." Inside was as harsh as outside. Stone walls, narrow corridors, rooms that felt more like cells than chambers. The great hall was massive, with a fireplace large enough to roast an ox, but it was freezing despite the fire burning there. "It's always cold," Darien said, seeing her shiver. "You get used to it." "Do you?" "Eventually." He led her up a winding stair to a room that must have been the Duchess's quarters, larger than the others, with windows that looked out over the moors. "This is yours. I'm next door if you need anything." "Separate rooms?" "I thought—" He stopped, something uncertain crossing his face. "I didn't want to assume. We married for practical reasons. I'm not going to force—" "Darien." She stepped closer. "I may not love you yet, but I chose this. I chose you. You don't have to treat me like glass." His eyes darkened. "Alara." A shout from below cut him off. Then another. Then the sound of hooves on stone. Darien's hand went to the knife at his belt. She hadn't even noticed he was wearing one, and he crossed to the window. "What is it?" Alara asked. "Riders, coming fast." His voice went hard. "McLeish colors." They ran. By the time they reached the courtyard, 20 riders had surrounded the gates, all armed, all wearing the dark green tartans of Clan McLeish. At their head was a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the fortress. Huge, scarred, with a beard like a bramble thicket. "Wolf!" His voice boomed across the courtyard. "Come out and face me." Darien stepped forward, Alara beside him. The McLeish chief's eyes swept over them and his lip curled. So it's true. You brought an English whore to Blackridge. Alara felt Darien go rigid beside her. Watch your mouth, McLeish, he said quietly. Or what? You'll hide behind her skirts? McLeish laughed, a cruel, grating sound. Your uncle was a lion. You're a lapdog. And now you bring this thing, and expect us to respect you. I expect you to honor the meeting we agreed to. 3 days. Neutral ground. I've changed my mind. McLeish leaned forward in his saddle. Here's the new terms. You give us the borderlands, all of them, and you send your English Duchess back where she came from, or we burn this place to the ground with both of you inside. Silence. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Those aren't terms, Darien said. That's surrender. Then call it what you want. You have until dawn tomorrow to decide. McLeish's eyes slid to Alara, cold and evaluating. Pretty thing. Shame she chose the wrong side. He wheeled his horse and the riders thundered away, leaving dust and tension in their wake. McTavish appeared at Darien's shoulder. Your Grace, get everyone inside, bar the gates, double the watch. Darien's voice was clipped, controlled. And send riders to our allied clans. If McLeish wants war, we'll give it to him. There's another option, Alara said quietly. Both men turned to her. We don't fight, she continued. We negotiate. McTavish made a sound like a strangled laugh. You can't negotiate with McLeish. He doesn't want peace. He wants blood. Then we give him something he wants more. Alara looked at Darien. You said they think you're weak, unproven. So prove them wrong. How? By doing what they don't expect. Her mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. They want the borderlands. Fine. Offer them a compromise, not surrender. Partnership. Joint stewardship of the disputed territory. They get access. You keep sovereignty. They'll never accept that, McTavish said flatly. Maybe not. But offering it shows strength, not weakness. It shows you're willing to lead instead of just react. Alara turned to Darien. And if they refuse, if they choose war over a fair offer, then every other clan will know McLeish is the aggressor. You'll have allies instead of enemies. Darien stared at her. That's insane, McTavish finished. Your Grace, with respect, your wife knows nothing of Highland politics. She knows people. Darien's voice was quiet but certain. And she's right. Fighting McLeish head-on is what he expects. What he wants. If we offer something different, something that makes us look reasonable and him look like a warmonger, we shift the power. It's a risk. Everything is. Darien looked at Alara. Can you do it? Face him down? Make the offer. Me? Her stomach dropped. You're the Duke, and you're the Duchess. An English Duchess who supposedly doesn't understand Highland ways. A fierce light entered his eyes. If you make the offer, if you stand in front of McLeish and prove you're not afraid, it changes everything. Shows them you're not some delicate flower I brought north to warm my bed. Shows them you're a partner, an equal. They'll laugh at me. Let them. Then make them listen. He took her hands. You survived London, Alara. You can survive this. She wanted to say no. Wanted to hide in that cold stone room and let the men handle this the way men always did, with steel and blood and pride. But she thought of Richard, of the ballroom, of Lady Whitmore's lawsuit, and all the ways she'd been powerless. And she thought, not anymore. All right, she said, I'll do it. Darien's smile was like sunrise. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. The next morning, Alara stood in the courtyard wearing a dress that wasn't hers, borrowed from somewhere in the fortress's depths, made of thick Highland wool dyed deep burgundy. It fit poorly, hung too long, made her look like a child playing dress-up. Perfect. She wanted to look out of place, wanted them to underestimate her. McLeish arrived at dawn with his 20 riders, all armed, all radiating violence barely held in check. Darien stood on the steps of the great hall, Alara beside him. McTavish and a dozen Blackridge men flanked them, hands on weapons. Well, McLeish's voice boomed across the courtyard. What's your answer, Wolf? Surrender or burn? Neither, Alara stepped forward before Darian could speak. McLeish's eyes narrowed. Did I ask you to speak, woman? No, I'm speaking anyway. Her voice didn't shake. That was something. You want the borderlands. We're prepared to offer joint stewardship. You get access, we keep sovereignty. Both clans benefit. McLeish stared at her. Then he laughed, loud and ugly. Joint stewardship. Listen to the English bitch trying to play politics. He looked at Darian. This is your answer? Sending your wife to plead your case? This is our answer, Darian said calmly. Take it or leave it. I'll leave it, along with your heads on pikes. McLeish's hand went to his sword. Last chance, Wolf. Surrender the lands or what? Alara's voice cut through his. You'll attack? Murder us in our own home? Break every code of Highland honor your ancestors died to uphold? McLeish went very still. Because that's what this is, Alara continued, her heart hammering but her voice steady. You're not a warrior defending his clan. You're a thug trying to steal land because you think we're too weak to stop you. And maybe we are. Maybe you'll win, but every other clan will know you for what you are. A man without honor. A coward who attacks before trying peace. You dare. I dare tell the truth. Just like I did in London. Just like I'll keep doing until someone actually listens. She stepped forward down the stairs, walking toward McLeish's horse like she wasn't afraid. She was terrified. But he didn't need to know that. You want respect? She said, stopping just out of reach. Earn it. Accept the compromise. Show everyone you're strong enough to lead with wisdom instead of steel. Or refuse and prove me right, that you're nothing but a brute too scared to share power. The courtyard was silent. McLeish's face had gone purple. Then, slowly, he dismounted. Alara's breath stopped. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and stood looking down at her, close enough that she could smell horse and sweat and rage. You've got fire, he said quietly. I'll give you that. Is that a yes? It's not a no. He looked past her to Darian. I'll take your offer to my council. If they accept, we'll meet to draw up terms. If they don't, his eyes returned to Alara. You'd better pray they do, Duchess, because when I come back, I won't be so forgiving. He remounted and the riders left, thunder on stone, leaving silence behind. Alara's legs gave out. Darian caught her before she hit the ground, his arms solid and warm around her. You did it, he breathed into her hair. You actually did it. Did what? I probably just started a war. No. You delayed it, gave us time. He pulled back to look at her face. And you showed them you're not afraid. That's worth more than any weapon. McTavish approached, his expression unreadable. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, he said slowly, or the stupidest. Can it be both? Alara's voice shook now that the danger had passed. A smile cracked McTavish's weathered face. Aye, I suppose it can. He looked at Darian. Your Grace, you chose well. She's got spine. I know. They helped Alara inside, and she collapsed in a chair by the great hall fire, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Darian knelt beside her. Alara, don't. She held up a hand. Don't tell me I was brave. I was reckless and stupid, and I could have gotten us all killed. But you didn't. This time. She looked at him, really looked at him. What if McLeish's council says no? What if they come back with an army? Then we fight. I don't know how to fight. You just did. He took her hand, and you won. But 3 days later, when the messenger arrived from McLeish, the news wasn't what anyone expected. The council had refused the compromise. War was coming, and Alara had just put herself directly in its path. The messenger stood in the great hall, mud-splattered and breathing hard, his face gray with exhaustion. He'd ridden straight through from McLeish territory without stopping. They refused. Darian's voice was dangerously quiet. Aye, Your Grace. The messenger swallowed. The council voted against the compromise, said it was an insult, that sharing land with a wolf was the same as giving it away. When do they march? 3 days, maybe less. The messenger's eyes flickered to Alara. They said, forgive me, Your Grace. They said the English Duchess should have kept her mouth shut, that her interference was the final insult. Alara's stomach turned to ice. McTavish slammed his fist on the table. Damn fools. We offered them a way out, and they spat in our faces. How many men can we muster? Darian asked, his tone shifting to something harder, more focused. 40 fighting men from Blackridge. Maybe 20 more if we call in favors from allied clans. McTavish's face was grim. McLeish will bring at least 80. We'll be outnumbered 2-1. Then we fortify, make them pay for every inch they take. Your Grace, McTavish hesitated. There's another option. I'm not surrendering. Not surrender. Evacuation. Get the Duchess to safety. Send the non-combatants to Allied territory. Hunker down with our best fighters and hold as long as we can. And when we fall? Darian's voice was sharp. What then? McLeish takes everything anyway, and we've just delayed the inevitable. At least you'd be alive. To do what? Spend the rest of my life knowing I ran? Darian shook his head. No, we fight. Alara listened to them argue, her mind racing. 3 days. 80 armed men coming to burn Blackridge to the ground because she'd stood in a courtyard and called their chief a coward. She'd started this, and sitting here while others died to finish it wasn't an option. What if we don't fight? She said quietly. Both men turned to her. We already tried negotiation, McTavish said, not unkindly. They rejected it. Not negotiation, strategy. Alara stood pacing to the fire. The flames cast shadows across her face. McLeish wants war because he thinks he'll win. But what if we take away his certainty? How? Darian asked. By doing what he doesn't expect. Again. She turned to face them. You said we could call in 20 men from allied clans. What if we called in more, not to fight, to witness? Witness what? A gathering. A formal Highland gathering on neutral ground. The idea was taking shape now, desperate and half-formed, but better than nothing. We invite every clan chief within riding distance, not to fight, but to hear both sides, to judge who's in the right. McTavish frowned. You want to hold a trial? I want to hold a reckoning. Alara's voice gained strength. McLeish is betting that no one will care if he destroys us. That might makes right in the Highlands. But if we force him to make his case in front of other chiefs, to justify attacking when we offered fair compromise, either he backs down or he loses allies. The clans don't interfere in each other's disputes, McTavish said. It's not done. Maybe it should be. Alara looked at Darian. You said they think you're weak, that you don't understand Highland ways. Prove them wrong by appealing to something deeper than tradition, honor. If McLeish attacks after we publicly offer him fair terms in front of witnesses, every other clan will know he chose violence over reason. Darian was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. That's insane. Is it working insane or failing insane? I don't know yet. He turned to McTavish. Could we even organize something like that in 3 days? If we sent riders now, called in every favor we have. McTavish was thinking it through, his weathered face creased with concentration. The chiefs would come, if only out of curiosity. A Sassenach duchess calling a Highland gathering? That's gossip worth traveling for. Exactly. Alara stepped closer. They'll come expecting a spectacle. We give them one, but on our terms. Make McLeish look like the aggressor. Make refusing peace look like cowardice instead of strength. And if it doesn't work? Darian asked quietly. If they side with McLeish anyway? Then we're no worse off than we are now. Alara met his eyes. But at least we'll have tried something other than just dying. A long silence. Then Darian smiled, fierce and sharp. All right, we do it your way. McTavish, send riders to every allied clan. Tell them the Duchess of Blackridge is calling a gathering to settle the McLeish dispute. 3 days from now, at the old Standing Stones by Glen Carrick. Glen Carrick is neutral ground, McTavish said slowly. No clan can claim it. And the Standing Stones, he nodded. Aye, that's a place for judgments. The old chiefs used it for settling blood feuds centuries ago. Then it's fitting we use it again. Darian looked at Alara. You understand what you're asking for. You'll have to stand in front of a dozen Highland chiefs and make your case. They won't be gentle just because you're a woman. Good. I don't want gentleness. I want to be heard. You will be. He took her hand. And if this works, if you actually pull this off, You'll have done something no one in Blackridge history has ever managed. What's that? Stopped a war with words instead of steel. The next 3 days were chaos. Riders thundered out in every direction, carrying word of the gathering. Alara worked alongside McTavish and Darien, planning every detail. Who would stand where? What would be said? How to frame the dispute so even the most war-hungry chief would see MacLeish's aggression for what it was. She barely slept. When she did, she dreamed of standing in front of hostile faces, opening her mouth to speak, and finding no words would come. On the morning of the gathering, she woke before dawn, her stomach in knots. Darien found her in the courtyard, staring out at the moors turning gray in the pre-dawn light. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. Third and fourth thoughts. She pulled her borrowed cloak tighter. "What if no one comes?" "They'll come. McTavish sent word back last night. At least 10 chiefs confirmed they're on their way." "And MacLeish?" "He'll come. He can't afford not to. Refusing would make him look like he's afraid of your judgment." "He should be. I'm terrified of it, and it's my own plan." She laughed shakily. "What am I doing, Darien? I don't know these people. I don't understand their customs. I'm going to stand in front of Highland chiefs and tell them the truth." He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "That's all you've ever done, Alara. In London, at the garden party, in that ballroom when you kissed me. You told the truth and refused to apologize for it. Do it again." "What if the truth isn't enough?" "Then we fight, but at least we'll know we tried." His eyes were steady on hers. "I believe in you. McTavish believes in you, even if he won't say it out loud. Half the people in this fortress believe in you. Now you just need to believe in yourself." She wanted to, needed to. So she nodded and let him lead her inside to prepare. Glen Carrick was a windswept hollow between two hills, dominated by a circle of standing stones so old no one remembered who'd raised them. The stones stood twice the height of a man, rough-hewn and weathered, marking the space like silent sentinels. By mid-morning, the hollow was filled with people. Chiefs arrived with their retinues, hard-faced men in clan colors, some friendly to Blackridge, others neutral, a few openly hostile. They gathered in loose groups, talking in low voices, watching the proceedings with the wary interest of people expecting violence. MacLeish arrived last, thundering in with 40 armed men at his back, his face dark as a storm. He saw Alara standing beside Darien near the center stone and his lip curled. "So the English bitch called a gathering," he announced to anyone listening. "This should be entertaining." Alara's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back where no one could see. McTavish stepped forward, his voice carrying across the hollow. "We're here to settle the dispute between Clan Wolf and Clan MacLeish. The Duchess of Blackridge has called this gathering under ancient tradition, the right of any wronged party to seek judgment from their peers." "Wronged party," MacLeish laughed. "She's the one who insulted me, called me a coward in my own hearing." "I called you what you are," Alara said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. "A man trying to steal land through intimidation instead of earning it through honor." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One of the chiefs, an older man with scars crossing his face like a map, stepped forward. "Let's hear the facts. Wolf, state your case." Darien stepped beside Alara. "Clan MacLeish has been pushing at our borders for years. Since I inherited, they've escalated, burning farms, killing livestock, threatening war unless we cede the disputed borderlands. We offered a compromise, joint stewardship, access for both clans, sovereignty maintained. They refused and threatened to march on Blackridge if we didn't surrender completely." "Because your compromise was an insult," MacLeish shot back. "Those lands belonged to my grandfather. Your uncle stole them through trickery 50 years ago. I'm taking back what's rightfully ours." "Then take it to a court. Present your evidence. Prove ownership." Alara's voice cut through before Darien could respond. "Or is that too civilized for you? Would you rather just kill everyone who disagrees with your version of history?" MacLeish's face went purple. "You dare! I dare ask for proof." She looked at the assembled chiefs. "He claims the lands are his by right. Fine. Show us the records, the deeds, anything that proves his grandfather owned them legally before they were supposedly stolen." "This isn't England," MacLeish snarled. "We don't settle disputes with paperwork." "Then how do you settle them? With blood? with whoever's stronger taking whatever they want. Alara stepped forward, into the space between the stones. Because if that's how it works, then none of you are safe. Today, it's Blackridge. Tomorrow, it's your lands, your clan, your family. All because someone decided might makes right. Silence. The chiefs were listening now, really listening. We offered peace, Alara continued, her voice carrying across the hollow. Fair terms that would have benefited both clans. McLeish refused because accepting would mean admitting we're equals. That I, a Sassenach woman, might have something worth hearing. He'd rather burn us to the ground than share power with someone he considers beneath him. You are beneath me, McLeish spat. You're an outsider, English. You don't belong here and you never will. Maybe not, but I'm here anyway, and I'm asking you, all of you. She turned to address the full gathering. Is this the Highlands you want? Where disputes are settled with torches and swords instead of words? Where the strongest bully gets whatever he wants and everyone else just accepts it? The Highlands have always been about strength, one of the chiefs called out. Strength, yes, but not stupidity. Alara's voice sharpened. What's strong about refusing peace? What's honorable about attacking when compromise was offered? McLeish wants you to think he's defending his heritage, but all I see is a man too proud to admit that maybe, just maybe, he's wrong. I am not wrong, McLeish's roar echoed off the stones. Then prove it, Alara challenged. Right here, right now. Show these chiefs the evidence that those lands belong to you. Show them why attacking Blackridge is justified. Show them anything other than wounded pride and a hunger for violence. McLeish opened his mouth, closed it, his hands clenched into fists. He had nothing. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The scarred chief who'd spoken earlier stepped forward. McLeish, do you have proof of your claim? My grandfather's word is not proof. The chief's voice was hard. I knew your grandfather. He was a good man, but he was also a gambler who lost more land in cards than he ever won in battle. If he claimed Wolf's lands were stolen, I'd want to see evidence before I backed that claim. You're taking his side? McLeish looked betrayed. I'm taking the side of sense. The chief looked at Alara, his scarred face thoughtful. The Duchess offered fair terms. You refused. If you attack now, after this gathering, every clan here will know you chose war over reason. And speaking for myself, I won't support that. Another chief spoke up, younger, with sharp eyes. Nor will I. The Sassenach woman's right. If we let you attack Blackridge without cause, it sets a precedent, makes all our borders vulnerable. We're Highland clans, a third chief added. We fight when we must, but we're not savages. The Duchess showed more honor calling this gathering than you've shown in a year of border raids. McLeish looked around the hollow at the assembled chiefs, at the men who should have been his allies, and saw the truth written on their faces. He'd lost, not on the battlefield, in something worse, the court of public opinion. This is madness, he said, but his voice had lost its thunder. You're siding with an English woman over one of your own? We're siding with reason, the scarred chief said. And right now, she's the only one showing any. McLeish's jaw worked. His hands opened and closed at his sides. For a moment, Alara thought he might attack anyway. Pride be damned. Then he spat on the ground at her feet and turned away. Keep your cursed lands, he growled. But this isn't over, Wolf. Someday you'll slip. And when you do, I'll be waiting. I'm sure you will, Darian said calmly. Until then, stay off Blackridge territory. McLeish mounted his horse without another word, his men following in grim silence. They rode out of Glen Carrick like a retreating army, leaving dust and defeat behind. The remaining chiefs turned to Alara. She stood there, still shaking, hardly believing what had just happened. The scarred chief approached, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he inclined his head. That took courage, Duchess, more than I expected it from a Sassenach. Thank you, Alara managed. I think. A smile cracked his weathered face. It's a compliment. You stood in front of hostile clans and made them listen. That's no small thing. He glanced at Darian. You chose well, Wolf. She's got a spine. I know. The other chiefs echoed the sentiment, some grudgingly, others with genuine respect. They didn't embrace her as one of their own, but they acknowledged her, and in the Highlands, that was worth more than gold. When the last of them had departed, promising to remember this day and spread word of what had transpired, Alara finally let herself collapse against one of the standing stones. Darian caught her, holding her steady. "You did it. I talked a lot and got lucky." "No, you saw what needed to be done and you did it, even when you were terrified." He cupped her face in his hands. "You stopped a war, Alara. Do you understand that? You actually stopped it. For now." She was shaking harder now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "McLeish will come back. You heard him." "Maybe, but when he does, we'll be ready. And more importantly," Darian's smile was fierce, "we'll have allies. Chiefs who saw you stand your ground and respected it. That changes everything." McTavish approached, his face carefully neutral. "Your Grace, that was unexpected." "Did I make things worse?" Alara asked. "Worse?" McTavish actually laughed, a rough, rusty sound. "Lass, you just did what no one's managed in 50 years. You made the clans listen to reason instead of reaching for steel first." He shook his head. "I didn't think it was possible. Didn't think you had it in you, honestly. I was wrong." "So was I," Alara admitted. "I spent the whole time sure I was about to get us all killed." "Fear and courage aren't opposites." McTavish's expression softened. "You were terrified and did it anyway. That's what bravery is." They rode back to Blackridge in silence, the weight of what had happened settling over all of them like snow. Alara watched the moors roll past, the fortress growing larger on the horizon, and felt something shift inside her chest. She'd come to Scotland running from one fight, only to walk straight into another. But this time, she hadn't run. This time, she'd stood and fought, not with weapons, but with words, with truth, with a stubborn refusal to let fear make her small. And she'd won. Not perfectly, not completely. McLeish was still out there, still angry, still dangerous. But for today, for this moment, she'd won. When they reached Blackridge, the entire household was waiting in the courtyard. Word had traveled fast. A cheer went up as they rode through the gates, rough voices shouting approval, hands clapping. The people who'd looked at her with suspicion just days ago now looked at her with something different. Respect. One of the older women, a cook, Alara thought, stepped forward and pressed something into her hands. A piece of bread, still warm, wrapped in cloth. "For luck, Your Grace," the woman said. "And for courage, though you've got plenty of that already." Alara's throat closed. She couldn't speak, so she just nodded and held the bread like it was something precious. Inside, the great hall had been prepared for a celebration, modest by London standards, but lavish for the Highlands. Roasted meat, fresh bread, ale flowing freely. Darian raised his cup. "To the Duchess of Blackridge, who proved today that strength comes in many forms." The hall erupted in agreement, voices raised in rough approval. Alara drank and felt the ale burn down her throat, warming her from the inside. Later, when the celebration had wound down and most of the household had stumbled off to bed, she found herself alone with Darian in the smaller sitting room off the great hall. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I don't know yet." She stared into the fire. "I keep waiting for the fear to come back, the certainty that I made a terrible mistake." "And?" "It's not coming." She looked at him. "I should be terrified. McLeish hates me now more than ever. Half the Highlands probably thinks I'm an arrogant Sassenach who doesn't know her place. But I just don't care." "That's called freedom," Darian said quietly. "Is it? You stopped letting other people's opinions control you. That's what you fought for in London, isn't it? The right to exist without apologizing for it?" She thought about that. About the ballroom, the garden party, the kiss that had started all of this. "I suppose it is." "Then welcome to the Highlands, Duchess." He raised his cup. "Where no one gives a damn what London thinks, and the only opinion that matters is your own." Alara clinked her cup against his and drank. And for the first time since Richard died, maybe for the first time in her entire adult life, she felt something close to peace. The days that followed were different. The household stopped treating her like fragile porcelain that might shatter if handled roughly. They gave her tasks, real ones: inventory of winter stores, settling a dispute between two farmers over grazing rights. Small things, but important. She made mistakes, got lost in the labyrinth of corridors, mangled the pronunciation of Gaelic names so badly that McTavish had to translate, served herself oat porridge that tasted like wallpaper paste because she didn't know how to prepare it properly. But she learned. And slowly, grudgingly, the people of Blackridge began to accept her. Not as a duchess, not yet, but as someone trying, someone willing to fail and get back up and try again. That was enough. 3 weeks after this gathering at Glen Carrick, a messenger arrived from one of the allied clans, Clan Fraser, led by the scarred chief who'd spoken in Alara's favor. Darian read the letter twice, his expression shifting from surprise to something fiercer. "What is it?" Alara asked. "Fraser wants to formalize an alliance, military, economic, the full arrangement." He looked up. "He says if MacLeish comes back, we won't fight alone. He'll stand with us." "Because of the gathering?" "Because of you." Darian handed her the letter. "Read the last part." Alara scanned down to the bottom. "The Duchess showed more spine than half the men I know. Tell her Fraser remembers those who stand when others run. If she ever needs allies, she has them." Her eyes stung. She blinked rapidly. "That's proof," Darian finished, "that what you did mattered, that you changed things." More letters arrived over the following weeks. Not many, but enough. Chiefs who'd been at the gathering, chiefs who'd heard about it secondhand, some offering alliance, others just acknowledging what had happened. The story spread through the Highlands like fire through dry heather. The English Duchess who'd faced down MacLeish with nothing but words and won. It became legend faster than Alara could process. And with legend came power. Not the kind she'd known in London, brittle, dependent on appearance and reputation. This was different, solid, real. The kind of power that came from people choosing to follow you because they believed you were worth following. One evening, as winter began creeping down from the mountains and the first snow dusted the moors, Alara stood at her window watching the landscape turn white. Darian joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "London?" She thought about it honestly. "I miss Mrs. Davies. I miss knowing how things work. I miss tea that doesn't taste like peat smoke. But I don't miss being afraid all the time. I don't miss wondering if every word I say will be used against me. I don't miss feeling like I'm constantly apologizing for existing." She leaned into him. "Here, I'm just myself. Flawed and foreign and making mistakes. But myself." "Good." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because you're stuck with us now." "Am I?" "The clans don't forget. You stopped a war, showed them a different way. They'll remember that." He paused. "And so will I." Alara turned in his arms to face him. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did. For believing I was stronger than I thought I was. For bringing me here when I was too scared to choose it myself." "You would have chosen it eventually." "Maybe, but you gave me the push I needed." She reached up to touch his face. "I didn't love you when we married. I want you to know that. I married you because I was desperate and running and out of options. I know, but I think—" She stopped, gathering courage. "I think I'm falling now. In love with you, slowly, messily. Not like stories where everything is perfect and certain, but real." His eyes went soft. "Real is better than perfect." "Is it enough?" "For me? More than enough." He smiled. "I didn't ask you to love me, Alara. I asked you to choose yourself. If love comes with it, that's just a gift I don't deserve, but I'll take anyway." She kissed him then, there in the window with snow falling outside and the highlands spread below them like a promise. And when she pulled back, she was smiling. Not the brittle, defensive smile she'd worn in London. A real one. "Welcome home, Duchess," Darian murmured. And for the first time, Alara believed it. Winter came hard to the highlands. Snow piled against the fortress walls until the courtyards looked like something carved from ice. The wind howled down from the mountains with teeth sharp enough to cut through wool and leather. Inside Blackridge, fires burned day and night, but the cold still crept through the stone like something alive. Alara learned to dress in layers, thick stockings under her skirts, a shawl wrapped twice around her shoulders, gloves she kept on even indoors. She learned which corridors held heat and which were best avoided. She learned that Highland winters weren't something you fought, they were something you endured. But she also learned they were beautiful. The moors turned into a white wilderness that stretched to the horizon, broken only by dark patches of heather and the occasional stand of skeletal trees. On clear days, the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. At night, stars covered the heavens like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. It was brutal and harsh, and nothing like London. She loved it. "You're getting better at this," McTavish said one morning as they inventoried the winter stores together. He'd taken to teaching her the practical side of running an estate. Food supplies, livestock counts, fuel reserves. Things the Duchess needed to know when spring was months away and survival depended on planning. "Better at counting grain sacks?" Alara asked, making a mark on her ledger. "Better at being here." He gestured vaguely at the storage room around them. "First month you jumped every time someone spoke Gaelic. Now you're starting to pick it up." "I know about 5 words. That's 4 more than most Sassenachs bother learning." He picked up a sack, testing its weight. "The people are warming to you, slowly. But it's happening. Even after I nearly started a war?" "You stopped a war. There's a difference." McTavish set the sack down and looked at her directly. "I'll be honest, Your Grace. I didn't think you'd last a week up here. Thought you'd take one look at this place and run back to England crying." "I almost did." "But you didn't. That matters." He paused. "And what you did at Glencarrick, that changed things. The clans respect strength, but they respect cleverness too. You showed them both." Alara felt warmth that had nothing to do with the fire spreading through her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Winter's just starting. Wait until February before you decide you love it here." He was right about February being worse, but he was wrong about her changing her mind. The message arrived on a morning so cold that the ink had frozen in its bottle overnight. A rider from the south, half dead from exposure, carrying sealed letters addressed to both the Duke and Duchess of Blackridge. Darian read his first, his expression going carefully blank. "What is it?" Alara asked. He handed her the letter without speaking. It was from Gerald. "Alara, I hope this letter finds you well, though I imagine Scotland in winter is trial enough without additional news. I'm writing with updates you should know. The lawsuit has been settled. Mother dropped all charges last week. Turns out public opinion turned against her rather dramatically after word spread about what Richard actually was. Several of his former mistresses came forward with their own stories. The scandal became too much even for her to maintain the fiction. More importantly, I found something while going through Richard's effects. Letters. Between him and the woman who was in the carriage the night he died. She was married to Lord Ashford. Yes, that Ashford. The affair had been going on for nearly a year. The crash happened because Richard was drunk and showing off, trying to impress her. She survived with minor injuries. He didn't. I've made sure certain people in London society know the truth. The story is spreading. You're no longer the villain in their narrative. Richard is. It's too late to undo all the damage, but your name is clearing. If you ever wanted to return to London, you could. But something tells me you won't. Take care of yourself. And if that Highland Duke makes you happy, then I'm glad you found him." Gerald Alara read it twice, her hands trembling. Vindication. After everything. After the ballroom, the accusations, the lawsuit, running north to escape it all, finally, vindication. She should feel triumphant, relieved, something. Instead, she felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. "Are you all right?" Darian asked quietly. "I don't know." She set the letter down. "I spent months wanting this, wanting them to know the truth, to see Richard for what he was. And now that they do, it doesn't matter anymore. Because you're not there to see it. Because I don't care if I am." She looked at him. "Does that make me terrible? That I don't care if London forgives me?" "It makes you free." He pulled her close. "You're not fighting their war anymore. You're building something here instead." "Am I building something?" "Every day." He kissed the top of her head. "Read your letter." She'd almost forgotten there were two. Her hands fumbled with the seal, her name written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet, the message brief. Your Grace, word of the Glen Carrick gathering has reached Edinburgh. The Crown takes note when Highland disputes are settled without bloodshed. We are impressed. Should you wish to pursue further diplomatic work between the clans, the Crown would support such efforts. The Highlands have been wild too long. Perhaps what they need is someone who understands both worlds. Consider this an open invitation. Secretary to the Lord Advocate. Ilara stared at it. They want me to mediate clan disputes, she said slowly. The Crown. They're asking me, a Sassenach woman who's been in Scotland less than 3 months, to help negotiate peace in the Highlands. Darian read over her shoulder and let out a low whistle. That's unprecedented. That's insane. Maybe both. He was smiling, though. Are you going to do it? I don't know. I barely survived one gathering. You want me to make a career of it? I want you to do whatever makes you feel alive. His hands settled on her shoulders. But if you're asking my opinion, you're good at this. Better than good. You see things others miss. Find solutions no one else thinks of. That's rare. Or I got lucky once. Then get lucky again. His eyes were fierce. You stopped a war, Ilara. You showed the clans a different way forward. If the Crown wants to support that, if they want to give you the authority to do it officially, why not take it? Because I'm still figuring out how to be a duchess. Adding Crown diplomat on top of that seems like exactly the kind of impossible thing you'd somehow pull off anyway. She laughed despite herself. You have too much faith in me. I have exactly the right amount. Before she could respond, shouts erupted from the courtyard. They ran. Outside, the household was gathering, pointing toward the southern approach. Riders, at least 20 of them, flying colors that made Ilara's stomach drop. MacLeish. Get inside, Darian ordered, his hand already on his sword. No. Ilara grabbed his arm. Wait, look. The riders weren't charging. They were approaching slowly, deliberately, and at their head wasn't MacLeish himself. It was a younger man, his face serious but not hostile. The riders stopped at the gates. The young man dismounted and approached, hands visible and empty. I'm here under flag of truce, he called. I need to speak with the Duke and Duchess of Blackridge. Darian exchanged a glance with MacTavish, then nodded. Open the gates, but keep weapons ready. The young man entered alone, leaving his escort outside. Up close, he looked barely 20, with MacLeish's dark coloring but softer features. I'm Connor MacLeish, he said, the chief's nephew. Where's your uncle? Darian asked. Dead? Connor's voice was flat. Fell from his horse 3 weeks ago, broke his neck. The council voted me in as the new chief. Silence. Ilara felt the shift in the air, grief, surprise, calculation. I'm sorry for your loss, she said quietly. Connor looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to see what had driven his uncle to such fury. Are you? He wanted you dead. I know, but I didn't want him dead. I wanted him to listen. He never did. Listen, I mean, to anyone. Connor's jaw worked. That's part of why I'm here. I'm not my uncle. I don't want war with Blackridge. I want... He stopped, seeming to gather courage. I want to accept your original offer, the compromise. Joint stewardship of the borderlands. Ilara's heart stuttered. What? Your offer. From Glen Carrick. It was fair. My uncle was too proud to see it, but I'm not. Connor's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. The council is split. Half want to continue the feud. Half want peace. I'm trying to lead them toward peace, but I need help. I need you to... He looked at Ilara. The chiefs talk about you, about what you did, how you stood in front of hostile clans and made them listen. I need that. I need someone who can help me convince my own people that peace isn't weakness. Darian stepped forward. You're asking the Duchess to mediate your internal clan dispute? I'm asking her to do what she did at Glen Carrick. Stand up and tell the truth. Make people see past their pride to what actually makes sense. Connor's voice cracked slightly. I'm 20 years old. Half my council thinks I'm too young to lead. The other half is waiting for me to fail so they can install someone more aggressive. If I can't show them a better way, if I can't prove peace is stronger than war, they'll push me out, and we'll be right back where we started. Alara looked at this young man barely older than she'd been when she married Richard, trying to lead a clan that didn't trust him, fighting battles he didn't want but couldn't avoid. She saw herself reflected there, desperate, terrified, trying to be strong enough even when everything inside screamed to run. "All right," she heard herself say. "I'll help." "Alara." Darian's voice held warning. "I'll help," she repeated more firmly. "On two conditions. First, you honor the original compromise. Joint stewardship, exactly as we outlined. Second, you come to the table in good faith. No tricks, no hidden agendas. If I'm putting my reputation on the line for you, you give me honesty in return." Connor's face flooded with relief. "Done. Both conditions. Both. Whatever you need." "Then we'll meet. 1 week from today. Glen Carrick again. Bring your counsel. We'll bring witnesses. And we'll settle this the right way." Connor clasped her hand, a Highland gesture of agreement. "Thank you, Your Grace. You won't regret this." After he'd gone, Darian turned to her. "That was either brilliant or reckless." "I'm still deciding which." Alara watched the McLeish riders disappear into the snow. "But he reminded me of myself, lost and trying to be brave. I couldn't say no to that." "You're collecting strays now?" Says the man who claimed a scandalous widow under his protection in a London ballroom. He smiled. "Fair point." The week passed in preparation. Alara worked with Connor through written correspondence, helping him frame his arguments, anticipate objections, build a case for peace that his counsel couldn't easily dismiss. She also reached out to the chiefs who'd attended the first gathering, inviting them back as witnesses. Most agreed, curious to see if lightning would strike twice. On the morning of the second gathering, Alara stood in front of her mirror wearing Highland dress for the first time. A proper one, not the borrowed thing from before. Dark green wool, black ridge colors woven through the fabric, a pin at her shoulder marking her as Duchess. She looked different, harder somehow, stronger, like Scotland had carved away everything soft and left only what was essential. "Ready?" Darian appeared in the doorway. "No, but I'm going anyway." "That's the spirit." Glen Carrick was just as cold as before. The standing stones dusted with snow that made them look even more ancient. But this time the crowd was different, larger, more varied. Word had spread. Chiefs who hadn't come the first time wanted to see the English Duchess, who supposedly worked miracles. No pressure. Connor arrived with his council, hard-faced men who looked at Alara with open skepticism. She met their stares and didn't flinch. The same scarred chief from before, Fraser, called the gathering to order. "We're here because young McLeish claims he wants peace," Fraser announced, "and because the Duchess of Blackridge has agreed to stand witness to his intentions. Connor, state your case." Connor stepped forward, his voice shaking slightly but determined. "My uncle died trying to claim lands through force. I don't want to continue that legacy. The Duchess offered fair terms months ago, terms that benefit both clans. I'm here to formally accept those terms and ask Clan Wolf to honor the original compromise." One of his counselors, older, with a face like granite, spoke up. "The boy is weak. Those lands belong to McLeish by right. Accepting Wolf's compromise is surrender." "It's strategy," Alara said before Connor could respond. Every eye turned to her. "You want those lands? Fine. Fight for them. Spend years in conflict, lose men, burn resources, make enemies of every clan that sides with Blackridge. Or," she stepped forward into the circle, "you take the compromise. Get access to the lands, maintain your honor, and free up your strength for things that actually matter, like surviving Highland winters, like building trade relationships, like not dying in pointless feuds over borders that have shifted a dozen times in the past century anyway." "You're Sassenach," the counselor sneered. "You don't understand Highland honor." "I understand waste, and throwing away lives over pride is waste." She looked at the assembled chiefs. "How many of you have lost men to feuds like this? To disputes over land that nobody really owns because it's been fought over so long no one remembers who held it first?" Silence. Uncomfortable shifting. "That's what I thought." Alara turned back to the counselor. "Connor isn't weak for choosing peace. He's smart. He's looking at the long game instead of just the next battle. That's leadership, real leadership. And if we refuse, the counselor challenged, if we vote to continue the feud, then you vote to isolate yourselves. Fraser's voice cut across the circle. Because I'll tell you right now, if MacLeish chooses war over this compromise, Clan Fraser stands with Blackridge. And I'm not alone. Other chiefs spoke up, echoing the sentiment. The tide was turning, not because they loved peace, but because refusing it after such a public offer made MacLeish look like aggressors. The granite-faced counselor looked around, saw the writing on the wall, and his shoulders sagged. Fine, he muttered. We accept the compromise. Joint stewardship. But if Wolf breaks the terms, then you have every clan here as witnesses to hold them accountable, Alara said. Same as we have witnesses to hold you accountable. That's how this works. Mutual trust, backed by mutual consequences. Connor's face flooded with relief. He turned to Darian. Your Grace, do you accept? I do. Darian stepped forward, offering his hand. Joint stewardship, equal access, disputes settled through mediation, not steel. Agreed? Connor clasped his hand. Agreed. The crowd erupted in approval, some grudging, some genuine, all of it loud. Alara stepped back, her legs shaking, and felt Darian's hand find hers. You did it again, he murmured. I got lucky again. Same thing. The rest of the gathering was formalities. Terms written down, witnesses signing, chiefs offering congratulations or warnings depending on their temperament. But the important part was done. Two clans that had been at each other's throats for generations were choosing peace, because one young chief had the courage to ask for help, and one duchess had the courage to give it. Later, as they rode back to Blackridge through snow that had started falling again, Alara felt something settle in her chest. Purpose. This was what she was meant to do. Not rule from a throne or manage a household or play politics in ballrooms. This, standing between warring parties and finding the thread of common ground, making people see past their pride to what actually mattered. She was good at it, and maybe, just maybe, she could keep doing it. I'm going to accept the crown's offer, she said suddenly. Darian looked over at her. The diplomatic work? Yes. If they're serious, if they actually want someone to help mediate between the clans, I'll do it. It'll be dangerous. The clans won't all be as reasonable as Connor. I know. And it'll mean traveling, being away from Blackridge for weeks at a time. I know that too. She met his eyes. But this is what I'm good at, Darian. This is where I make a difference. I can't just sit in the fortress managing grain stores when I could be out here stopping wars. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're right. I am? You're brilliant at this. Watching you work, it's like watching someone finally do what they were always meant to do. His smile was fierce with pride. So yes, accept the offer. Build something no one's ever built before. I'll be here when you come home. You're not worried I'll fail? I'm worried you'll succeed so well that the crown will try to steal you away permanently, but that's a different problem. He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. You're going to change the Highlands, Alara. I can feel it. Or get myself killed trying. Probably both. She laughed, and the sound carried across the snowy moors like music. Spring came slowly to the Highlands, but it came. Snow melted into rushing streams, green pushed up through the brown earth, lambs appeared in the fields, stumbling on new legs, and Alara traveled. She mediated 3 more disputes that spring, smaller than MacLeish, but each one a small victory. A boundary disagreement resolved through surveying instead of violence. A trade dispute settled with a contract instead of a feud. A marriage alliance brokered between 2 clans that had been enemies for decades. Word spread. The English Duchess who could talk clans down from war. The woman who understood both Highland honor and practical sense. Some chiefs welcomed her. Others refused to meet with a Sassenach woman on principle. But slowly, so slowly, the Highlands began to change. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But in pockets. In places where people were tired of fighting and willing to try something different. Alara became the bridge between those places. And Blackridge became the center of it all. Chiefs started visiting not for war councils, but for actual councils, discussions about trade, about shared resources, about building relationships instead of burning them. The fortress that had looked like a monument to isolation slowly became something else. A gathering place, a neutral ground, a symbol that peace was possible. 2 years after the first gathering at Glen Carrick, Alara stood in the Great Hall, hosting a feast for a dozen clan chiefs and their families. Children ran through the corridors, laughter echoed off stone walls. Alliances were being forged over roasted meat and ale. It wasn't perfect. There were still feuds, still conflicts, still chiefs who refused to bend. But it was better. McTavish found her watching from the edge of the hall, a cup of wine in her hand. "Quite a change from that first winter," he said. "You mean when everyone thought I'd run back to England crying?" "Aye, that," he smiled. "I was wrong about you, Your Grace. Spectacularly wrong. You weren't the only one. I was wrong about me too. And now? Now I know what I'm capable of." She looked at the hall full of former enemies breaking bread together. "I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. I still get scared. But I'm doing something that matters." "You are." McTavish's voice was gruff with emotion. "Your Grace, Alara, what you've built here, it's going to outlast all of us. You know that, right?" She hadn't thought about it in those terms. Legacy, something that would survive long after she was gone. "I hope so," she said quietly. "It will. Mark my words." Later that night, after the guests had retired and the hall had been cleared, Alara found Darian on the battlements looking out over the moonlit moors. "Hiding from your own party?" she asked. "Thinking." He pulled her close against the cold. "Do you remember what you said that first night in the carriage, after the ballroom?" "I said a lot of things, most of them terrified." "You said you didn't know if you'd made the right choice, coming north with me." "I remember." "Do you know now?" Alara thought about it, about the journey that had brought her here, the scandal, the accusations, the desperate flight from London, about the woman she'd been then, broken and running, versus the woman she was now. "I made the only choice I could," she said finally, "and it turned out to be the right one. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because it gave me room to become who I actually am instead of who everyone expected me to be." "And who are you?" "Still figuring that out." She smiled. "But I like her so far." "So do I." He kissed her temple. "In case I haven't said it recently, thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to say yes. For standing in that courtyard and facing McLeish when you could have hidden. For building something beautiful out of the wreckage we both brought north." His arms tightened around her. "For being exactly who you are." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you. I don't think I've said that properly, but I do. Completely." "I know." His voice was warm. "You show me every day." They stood there in the Highland night, wrapped in each other and the quiet peace they'd fought so hard to build. 3 years later, Alara stood in the same spot holding a daughter who had her father's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin. 5 years after that, she mediated the first ever Highland Council, a formal gathering of 20 clan chiefs who agreed to settle all major disputes through discussion before resorting to violence. 10 years after arriving in Scotland, she received a letter from London, from Caroline Pemberton, of all people. "Alara, I know we haven't spoken since you left. I know I was terrible to you when you needed friends most. I'm not writing to ask forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because word of what you've done in Scotland has reached London. They're calling you the peacemaker, the Duchess who tamed the Highlands. It's become fashionable to talk about you at parties, not as the scandalous widow, but as someone remarkable. Lady Whitmore died last month, bitter and alone. The lawsuit destroyed what was left of her reputation. No one mourned. I thought you'd want to know. Not because it matters to you anymore. I suspect it doesn't. But because you won, Alara. Not the way you thought you would. Not in London's ballrooms or society's favor. You won by leaving, by building something better, by becoming someone none of us ever imagined you could be. I'm proud of you, even if I have no right to be." Caroline Alara read it once, then fed it to the fire. Caroline was right. It didn't matter anymore. London was another life, another person. This, the Highlands, the work, the family she was building with Darian, this was real. and she had no intention of ever going back. 20 years after arriving at Blackridge, Alara stood at Glen Carrick for a gathering that would have been impossible when she first arrived. Every major clan in the Highlands was represented, not for war, for the signing of the Highland Accord, a formal treaty establishing permanent mediation protocols, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. It wasn't perfect. Some clans refused to participate. There would still be feuds, still conflicts, but it was a foundation, something to build on. As the chiefs signed their names, some with pride, some grudgingly, all of them aware they were part of something historic, Fraser approached her. He was ancient now, his scars deeper, his hair white, but his eyes were still sharp. "You did it, Duchess," he said quietly. "Changed the whole damn Highlands." "We did it," Alara corrected. "All of us. Together." "Don't be modest. This is your legacy, your doing." He smiled. "The Sassenach woman who taught Highlanders to talk instead of fight. They'll tell stories about you for centuries. Let them tell stories about peace instead. That matters more." "Aye, but they'll tell both." He clasped her shoulder with surprising strength. "You were exactly what we needed, even if we didn't know it." "Thank you." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the circle of stones that had witnessed so much change. Darian appeared beside her, their children, 3 now, trailing behind. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Alara looked around Glen Carrick one more time, at the chiefs gathered in peace, at the treaty that would reshape the Highlands, at the future being built on the foundation she'd helped lay. "Yes," she said, "let's go home." They rode back to Blackridge as the sun set, painting the moors gold and crimson. The fortress rose ahead of them, solid and permanent, its walls scarred by centuries of conflict but standing still, like her. Scarred, changed, stronger for everything she'd survived. Alara had come to the Highlands running from scandal and shame, a widow branded by society, desperate and afraid. She'd become a duchess, a diplomat, a mother, a legend. But more than any of that, she'd become herself. Fully, completely, without apology. And as they passed through Blackridge's gates to the cheers of people who'd long since stopped seeing her as an outsider, Alara felt something she'd never felt in London. Home. Not because of the stone walls or the title or the land, but because she'd earned her place here. Built it with her own hands, her own courage, her own refusal to be anything less than what she knew she could be. That night, tucked into bed beside Darian with their children asleep down the hall and the Highland wind singing outside, Alara thought about the woman she'd been in that London ballroom. Broken, humiliated, certain she had nothing left. If she could go back and tell that woman what was coming, the fear, the struggle, the brutal winter and hostile clans and endless work of building peace, would she have had the courage to choose it? Maybe not. But she'd chosen it anyway, and that made all the difference. "What are you thinking about?" Darian murmured in the darkness. "How far I've come. How different everything is. Do you miss it? Your old life?" "Not for a second." She pressed closer to him. "That woman in London, she was drowning. I saved her by bringing her here. You saved yourself. We saved each other." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for believing I was strong enough before I did. Thank you for being brave enough to try." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, in the life they'd built, in the peace they'd fought for. And outside, the Highlands stretched on forever, wild and harsh and beautiful, exactly where Alara belonged. The widow who'd been branded by society had become the woman who changed a nation. Not through perfection, not through certainty, but through courage, through truth, through the simple, stubborn refusal to let anyone else decide who she was allowed to be. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered.